All right, guys, welcome back. And today we are looking at Unit 3, Outcome 2, the second key knowledge dot point, which is on motivation theories, which happens to be, I think, definitely one of the most tested key knowledge dot points across the entire Year 12 course. So here is our snapshot of the study design. Here's what we're looking at today. So you can see key principles of the following theories of motivation, and then it lists 3 theories. Now, like I say, this is the most, if not the most, certainly one of the most tested key knowledge dot points. This has been on all of the study designs. They do play around with which theories you need to know. There's been one that's always been there, and the others have changed, which I'll kind of touch on in a second. But first off, motivation theories. So we haven't really talked too much about motivation previously. We've kind of touched on it as it kind of relates to other aspects of business so far, but it's never really been a focus for us. So the first thing, I guess, to ask ourselves is, why is motivation important? Okay, why are we even looking at this? So what are the benefits to our business of having employees who are motivated? Okay, lots and lots of answers to this. This is not a conclusive list, but some examples of why we might want motivated employees in our business. First off, motivated employees are probably going to be happier and more engaged in their work. That's clearly a good thing. They're probably more likely to work harder, so they're going to be more productive and more efficient. They're going to produce higher quality work. Happy people work better than not so happy people. It results in a positive corporate culture. So if our business is full of happy people that love coming to work, it's going to create that kind of positive vibe within our business that we're looking for. And absenteeism and staff turnover are going to be minimized, directly reducing costs, because there is, other than other issues in a business about having high absenteeism and staff turnover, there is a direct financial cost to both of those things. So we're going to minimize that. All of those things combined basically lead to an increased likelihood that the business will be achieving its objectives, including higher profitability, which, as we know, pretty much for any business is going to be one of the key objectives. So we know now why motivation is important. So I guess this is on a motivation theory. So the next question probably is going to be, what are motivation theories? Now, at the end of the day, the role of a manager is to get things done through other people. Fundamentally, that's what a manager is there to do. Kind of, if you had to, explain the role of a manager in a sentence, in a nutshell, and this is closely linked to the definition of leadership as well, which makes sense. Getting things done through other people. Obviously, the manager can't do all of the work that needs to be done in the business themselves. They need to get that work done through their people. So for a manager, getting the best out of their team, to do that, they need to understand what motivates them. Makes sense. One of the jobs of human resource managers, now this whole outcome is on human resource management, so one of the key jobs of HR managers is to basically support and advise line managers in the business and help them to do exactly this. Okay. Now, over the years, academics have studied various aspects of human behavior, including what motivates humans. So as a result of all of that study, there's a number of theories of motivation that have been produced by a really large number of academics. Now, this crosses into psychology as well. I'm not sure if you touch on motivation in psychology VCE, but a lot of this has its base in psychology. Okay. Now, each of the theories takes a different view on what it is that actually motivate humans. And we'll kind of see that play out as we look at the 3 that we're going to look at today. Okay, some are general human behavior theories, which really did start with their base in psychology. And some of these theories have kind of been born out of the workplace and are kind of more specific, have more specific application to the workplace. And actually, in this video, we kind of cover both kinds, to be fair. Okay. Now, what are motivational theories? If you just Googled motivation theories or motivational theories, you're going to come up with a huge number of different theories. Okay, so just an example, 8 or 9 you see there. Okay, Spurs two-factor theory, Locke's goal setting theory, equity theory, motivation. There's tons and tons and tons, and they've all been written by different people over a period of time. Okay, and they all have a different approach to approach an idea about what motivates people and how you can motivate your team. Okay. The reality is, we have our script. The study design mentions the 3 that we need to know about. So you never, ever talk about any of the other ones, just the ones I've now highlighted in green on the screen. Those are the 3 that the study design says you need to know about. They're the only 3 that we're going to look at in this video. They're the only 3 you ever mention in answering questions. And you will, because we're not going to talk about any of the others and you won't know anything about them, so you kind of can't. But yeah, very, very specific script for this one. Those 3 are the ones that we're going to talk about today. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Locke and Latham's goal-setting theory, and Lawrence and Nohria's 4-drive theory. Now, those little diagrams you see there associated with each, after this, that's probably, when you think about that theory, that's probably, you want to kind of visualize this diagram. It's useful just to have kind of an association of what it looks like. And those little diagrams, as you'll find out as we go through, are a really good, very simple little association for each theory. And that'll kind of make more sense as we go through them, I guess. So those are the 3, and those are the little diagrams that will represent each. So starting with the first, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, one of the first true motivational theories, okay, that kind of come out there. Abraham Maslow wrote a paper in 1943, A Theory of Human Motivation. And in that paper, he produced his hierarchy of needs theory. Even today, 80 years later, if my maths is correct, still one of the most well-known and widely studied motivation theories. If you go onto uni and do any kind of a business course, you're always going to do some stuff on motivation. You'll definitely touch on this one. Okay, so this is probably the most well-known, widely studied motivation theory that has ever been. And it looks like this. Okay. Now, this theory, basically what Maslow said, is that within all people, within all humans, exists a hierarchy of 5 needs, and those needs can be arranged based on the importance of those needs, hence the term hierarchy. Starting at the bottom of the hierarchy, each level must be satisfied before moving up to the next level. At that point, the preceding level, the level from which you've just come, which has now been satisfied, no longer provides motivation. Okay. So think about that. It's really important that you get this idea that it's a pyramid. You start at the bottom and you move through in the order that you see there. And once you've satisfied one level, that level no longer motivates you, and the very next level above it becomes your main motivator. At which point, once you've satisfied that level no longer motivates you, and the one above does, and you move through like that. And if you think about it, in fact, what we'll do, what does each of these levels mean? Okay, so let's just put a little bit of explanation around those levels. Now I'm going to start at the bottom, physiological needs, and move through the hierarchy bottom to top in the way that Maslow says you need to move through the hierarchy. So physiological needs. Now remember, this was a human motivational theory. This was not a business. It wasn't born out of business. Okay, we now apply it in a business context, and we will look at how you do that in a minute. But this is a basic human motivational theory. So when you see some of this stuff, you're like, what's that got to do with business? Particularly the first couple. So what Maslow says, that the first level, the bottom level, physiological needs. This is the basic requirements for human survival: food, water, shelter. Now, this is the bottom tier, the very first level, because if you don't meet those needs, none of the levels above are ever going to be relevant, because you'll basically be dead. Yeah, if you don't have food, water, shelter, you're not going to last long. So fundamentally, as humans, the very first need that we must satisfy is those physiological needs. Okay, food, water, shelter. Now, once we have satisfied those needs, in other words, we have enough food, we have enough water, we have shelter, so physiologically our needs are met. Think then, logically, what becomes the next thing that you need to worry about in life? Okay, safety needs, the next level up. Okay, so now you've got your food, you've got your water, you've got your shelter. Your next concern is to be protected from harm. Okay, from dangerous or threatening environments, whether they're physical, mental, or emotional. Okay, so hopefully you're with me so far, and that makes some sense. We've satisfied our physiological needs. Okay, we have our food, we have our water, we have our shelter. No longer are those providing motivation, because we've met those. We've ticked that box. Now, the next thing up that we need to worry about is our safety. Once we feel that we are safe and we have met those needs, what Maslow said is that the next need that is going to motivate humans is the need for a sense of belonging and friendship, love, affection, acceptance, which I personally would agree with. So now we've met our physiological needs, we've met our safety needs, but we do not yet feel that sense of belong. We don't feel part of a group. We don't have friendship. We don't have connections. We don't have love and affection. So that becomes our main motivator in life. Until which point we satisfy that one, and then number 4 becomes our motivator. So hopefully you can see what we're doing here. It's about meeting a level that no longer motivates, so we move up to the next level. Once we've met that one, it no longer motivates. The next one becomes our motivator, and we move through. So self-esteem needs, the need to feel important, valuable, respected. You can see what it says there. You can read that for yourself. And then the 5th, self-actualization needs, at the top of the pyramid that Maslow said, is all about reaching our full potential through creativity and personal growth. And there's a bit more of a explanation of that there. Okay, so really, really important that you understand that this is a hierarchy. We start at the bottom, we move through it, and we end up at the top. So we become, according to Maslow, we become fully self-actualized if we've met that final need. Okay, so if you think about what we've just said, that how does that apply to business? Okay, that was, like I said, that was a very human motivational theory. Okay, this just applies to humans, not business. So what we now need to do is convert this into some kind of a framework which we can then apply to our business scenario. So now we're going to put some strategies to each of those levels that allows managers to help employees move through the levels. Okay, so first off, physiological needs. So in a business context, that's basically providing employees with a job which provides them with fair and reasonable pay. Okay, so in a business context, physiological needs, that need is met. That is what you need to do to provide or to satisfy that level of motivation for your employees. Now, once that has been met, and again, this does make sense if you think about it. If I have a job and I'm paid enough, I've got my job and I'm paid enough, then what's my next thing I'm thinking about that I want to get out of my work? Okay, safety, creating a sense of job security. So now I have a job that pays me enough. I think it's fair and reasonable pay. So now I want to feel that I have that job for some length of time. Like that job is not going to be taken away from me. So that creates my sense of safety. So create a sense of job security. So in other words, a strategy that a manager might do is providing ongoing contracts rather than casual employment for employees. For example, you can make sure that OH&S, occupational health and safety, is all sorted across the workplace. So people come to work feeling safe, physically safe, that they're not going to be injured or harmed. Okay. Now, obviously, certain workplaces that is going to be more important and more prevalent than others, but in any work environment, there's always going to be OH&S requirements. You need to make sure that you kind of at least meet those and probably go further than provision of superannuation and insurance, competent, consistent, and fair management. So these things are strategies that managers can put in place to make sure that it is possible for their employees to meet the safety needs according to Maslow's hierarchy. We then move up social needs. So basically now our employees or our employee, they feel that they've got a job that pays them fair and reasonable amount of money. They feel that job is going to be ongoing and it's not going to be taken away from them at any time soon. They come to work and they feel physically safe. You know, their superannuation's been paid, work cover is being paid, they're being managed in a competent and fair way. So all of the safety needs are being met, but they still don't feel they're part of the team. Okay, they come into work every day and they don't feel so. So now level three is what becomes the driver, the motivator for that employee. Okay, they don't feel part of the team, and that's not a nice feeling. Yeah, when you go to work, you want to kind of feel part of something. You want to feel part of the team. So the strategies the manager can use to get employees to have that level satisfied is things like organising employee social activities, sporting activities, Friday drinks, anything that kind of brings people together and encourages a sense of team. Creating opportunities for teamwork in the workplace, celebrating birthdays, something we do in senior school. You know, for everybody's birthday, you might have come in the office, you see cakes. February, March is the key time, or nearly all of us have our birthdays in February, March for some reason. So there's a lot of cake at the moment, and it's just something that we do, and it just kind of gets this sense of team. You know, just simple stuff like that. So now our employee, we've put that stuff in place. Now our employee is definitely feeling okay. We've got a job. It's an ongoing job. I feel safe. I feel part of the team. What's now motivating me? Okay, now self-esteem becomes a motivator. So now achieving greater responsibility. So now the business can put some of these strategies in place. So increase the responsibility levels of that employee. Maybe providing bonuses. We go back to performance or for performance related pay, something we'll look at in the next key knowledge dot point. Offering promotions, pay linked to status of position in the workplace, having maybe prestigious workplace facilities, that sort of thing. Then at the top, we come to self-actualization. So what strategies can management have in place to allow employees to achieve that level? So providing challenging work, providing opportunities for skill, knowledge development, opportunities to be creative, maybe, and maybe opportunity for employees to become involved in high level decision making. So hopefully you can see here, when you understand what the original Maslow theory, what each level kind of meant, now all we've done here is kind of put a framework over that to apply it into a business, and a structure that managers can use to help their employees move from one layer to the next. And the idea is, how does a manager use Maslow to motivate the employee? Basically, you need to work out where each of your team members sits in that hierarchy and then work on the strategies to get them to that next level. It's as simple as that. Okay. So, how does the manager actually use this theory or put into practice? Because often the questions around this, it says describe the theory and explain how the manager can actually implement the theory in the workplace. So, first off, you need to establish where each employee is currently at on the hierarchy. And realistically, the only way to do this is meeting with each employee and having a discussion. Now, you're not going to sit down and say, "Hi, Tommy, how you going? So where do you sit on Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the moment?" That's clearly not going to work because they're not going to understand what Maslow's hierarchy of needs is. So you need to have a discussion. You understand what you're trying to get out of this discussion, and you're asking questions that lead you to a place where you kind of get a feel for where they're sitting on the hierarchy without directly asking them, where do you sit on the hierarchy? Because they will have no clue what you're talking about. Okay. So the great thing about doing this is that you can then come up with strategies from that list we've just looked at to get that person up to the next level. Okay. And that's all about, so this, the use of this theory is all about getting all of your people through. So if you've got people sitting at level 1, you need to get them to level 2. If they're all sitting on level 4, that's great. You need to get them to level 5. The reality is, what you're going to have is, if you've got a big team, you're going to have people at different levels. Hopefully, you don't have too many at the bottom. If you do, you've got some serious work to do, putting in place some management structures. But you need to identify where each person is, and then put the strategies we just looked at to move them to the next level. And then again, once those are satisfied, they move to the next. Okay. Probably got a feel here, and we'll look at the advantages and disadvantages a bit later, but already you can probably pick up on the vibe that this is going to be really time consuming. Sitting down and having these conversations with everybody in the team, it's a lengthy process. And then, of course, you don't just do that once. You would want to do that, every 3 months, every 6 months, or how often, because you want to know then if those strategies worked and then what strategies you need to do to get them to the next level. So this is an ongoing process. It is time consuming because it involves lots of individual discussions with all the team. So it takes some time. That is Maslow. We now look at Locke and Latham, the second theory, Locke and Latham's goal setting theory. Okay, so this one was a bit later, so 20 years after Maslow. A couple of North American psychologists, they carried out some research into motivation. They came up with a completely different theory to Maslow's. Very, very different. Okay, they came up with a theory that goal setting is the key motivating employees. So they actually, so apart from they were psychologists, but they were already thinking about a work setting. So this is kind of one area where this differs. This isn't a basic human psychological theory as Maslow was. This one really was already thinking about the workplace. But what they found was that the setting of goals leads to increased effort, increased task focused, and increased persistence of employees. Okay. They also found that this theory can be used to motivate either an individual or a team. Unlike Maslow, as we've just said, you use that to motivate individuals. So here already you're thinking, here's one advantage of Locke and Latham's theory, perhaps over Maslow, in that you can kind of do a team in one go to a point. Now, according to Locke and Latham, so again, through this process of extensive research, they've identified that it's not fulfilling of needs. That's not what motivates people. It's achieving goals. So they said there's 5 goal setting principles that need to be applied to an individual's personal and team goals. And when you're describing and explaining the Locke and Latham theory, this is the focus of your explanation. Okay. And you can see them down there: clarity, challenge, commitment, and so forth. So basically what they're saying is employees are motivated by the achievement of goals. We need to have these 5 things in place for this to work. First off, clarity. Okay, goals need to be specific. They need to be easy to measure. Okay, we've got to have easily measurable goals that are very specific. Can't have vague goals. If you're a 100-meter athlete, you're a elite athlete, you're a 100-meter specialist, your best time 10.5 seconds. Your goal is not to run faster. It's going to be to run a 10.3 by the end of the year or something. Comes kind of back to the idea of SMART goals. Some of this actually sits within the framework of SMART goals, although SMART goals are not mentioned specifically, but there's some similarities here about setting SMART goals. There needs to be clear expectations. So employees have to completely understand what is expected of them. Okay, clarity, yeah, makes sense. Goals must be clear, or they're not going to be motivating. If employees don't really understand the goals, how are they going to be motivated to achieve them? Commitment. Okay, so the second principle, collaborative goal setting is key here. So basically, what we're saying here is commitment. We want employees to be committed to achieving these goals. The best way to do that is to set them collaboratively. What I mean by that is rather than me as your manager sitting down with you and saying, right, here are your goals over the next 6 months. Okay, goal one, blah, blah, blah. Goal two, blah, 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 so on and so forth. A much better way to get the employees' commitment and buy-in to the goal is to involve them in the creation of the goals in the first place, which is why it says employees should be involved in the setting of their own goal. You're much more likely to buy into a goal and then be motivated to achieve it if you've had some say in the setting of that goal. I don't think you'd argue against that. That makes sense. Instead of someone saying, right, this is your goal, if you've actually been involved in the setting of that goal, you've had some say in it, much more chance that you're going to buy into it and therefore it motivates you. Okay. It would also be helpful if the goals can incorporate personal interests of the employees. So make the goal specific and personal to them. Again, much more chance they're going to be committed to achieving it if they're interested in some way in achieving the goal. Okay. That's your first two principles. Makes sense so far. Challenge is the third one. So what they say is goals should be difficult enough that employees need to improve in order to achieve them, but they must also be realistic. So it's this idea of having a stretch goal. Okay, we need to stretch ourselves to achieve it, but not setting the goal so high, setting the bar so high that it is just patently unachievable, because that will just become absolutely demotivating. So again, we go back to our 100-meter runner. Their best time is 10.5. Okay, so by the end of the year, run a 10.3. If we set our goal is to run 6 seconds, it's just ridiculous. It's unachievable. That's not going to provide any motivation whatsoever. So challenging, but realistic. Task complexity. Goals should not be overwhelming and should be ultimately achievable. I mean, that kind of ties back in with the challenging one there, yeah? And employees must receive adequate training and time to achieve their goals. There's no point in setting a goal. You need to do this. You need to do it by tomorrow. Okay, you've got to give employees a realistic amount of time for them to achieve the goal, and also it might involve them receiving some specific training to actually help them get there. Again, there's no point in setting that goal when you and the employee both know that they don't currently have the skills and knowledge and the ability to get there. You need to provide whatever training they're going to need to help them achieve that goal. Feedback, really, really key. Managers must provide regular support to employees and adjust the goals as necessary. Progress needs to be constantly monitored, and employees must be given feedback. So I guess what we're saying here is, right, say the goal is a 12-month goal. What we don't do is have a meeting with our employee, and we can do all of the other stuff here. We can collaboratively set some very clear goals, which are challenging, but they're not overwhelming. We can tick all of those first four boxes. We say, right, this is to achieve over the next 12 months. So this final principle, feedback, what we're saying here is we don't then walk away from that meeting and then meet again in 12 months to see if we've achieved that goal. We need to regularly catch up with the employee. It might be monthly, it might be quarterly, whatever's kind of applicable, whatever makes sense, to be measuring as we go, okay, to provide feedback. So this is the goal we've got to achieve over 12 months. If we meet in 3 months and we basically say, okay, how are we going towards that goal? At that point, it might be that the employee might have already achieved the 12-month goal. Okay, so then you're resetting the goal maybe a bit further out. It might be patently obvious after 3 months that even in 12 months, this is not going to happen. So then you adjust the goals. This is what we're talking about, adjusting the goals. Adjust the goals as necessary, whether it's extending them or reining them back in. Keep employees on track. Give feedback. Okay, so if they're on track, give them some praise. If they're not on track, you can provide some extra support, maybe some extra training, give them some encouragement to keep going. Okay, so hopefully you understand this idea of feedback is really, really important. Without the feedback element here, all of the rest of it just kind of falls apart. Okay, it's not good enough just to say, right, here's a goal for a year and then meet in a year. You've got to be constantly meeting to provide that feedback as we go. How does a manager actually use this? A little bit like what we did with Maslow. Once we have an understanding of the theory, how does the manager actually do it? Now, again, having a meeting with each employee and agreeing on some goals for the future. Okay, so this covers off on the commitment and the collaborative kind of part of it. Then you've got to make sure that any of the goals that you set kind of then meet those other principles. So this idea of clarity, challenge, and task complexity. Okay, so it does involve sitting down with each employee and having this meeting. Then you need to arrange this series of follow-up meetings we'll be talking about to provide the feedback. Okay, so you discuss progress over the whole life of the goal. As with Maslow, it still is a time-consuming process, particularly with those regular follow-ups. So again, already we're thinking about if we have to compare these motivation theories. Well, there's a similarity already between Maslow and Locke and Latham. It involves meeting with each employee regularly to kind of see where we're at, which we'll kind of get onto how we use that shortly. Okay, hopefully you're understanding where we're going with that one. Now, the third and final theory, Lawrence and Nohria's four-drive theory. Okay, so this one, again, later, 2002, by a couple of Harvard Business School professors. Now, what they were looking at is a more holistic way to motivate employees. So their research basically identified four basic motivational needs already. This is sounding a little Maslow-esque. Now, the level to which these needs are satisfied directly affects our emotions and our behaviors. Okay. And their theory suggests that people strive to balance these four fundamental desires. Okay. Four drives: drive to acquire, the drive to bond, drive to learn, and the drive to defend. So, what do each of these mean? Drive to acquire, very simply, the drive to, or the desire to achieve rewards and status. Okay, in a business, that means employees who want to receive financial or non-financial rewards in recognition of their effort and their performance. So managers can fulfill that drive by rewarding employees who perform well and meet targets. Simple as that. The drive to bond, the desire to feel a sense of belonging, to connect with others, and to feel part of a team. So managers can fulfill this one by implementing a range of strategies, including social events for employees, encouraging teamwork, team bonding, celebrating employee birthdays. Already now, some of this should be sounding familiar if we're talking comparing our theories. There's a direct comparison with Maslow's sense of belonging, the third level in the hierarchy, because it was talking about the exact same thing. The drive to learn. Now, I've put there also or comprehend. Sometimes you see it referred to as the drive to learn. Sometimes you see it referred to the drive to comprehend. Just be aware of both so it doesn't throw you if you see it referred to as the one that you're not used to. This is all about the desire to gain knowledge, skills, and experience. Okay, employees seeking to improve their capabilities at work through training, maybe taking on extra responsibility, that sort of stuff. So managers can fulfil this drive by implementing strategies such as offering training and development opportunities to employees, introduce maybe a mentoring system, job rotation, which just means trying out different jobs within the same business, maybe paying for employees to complete further or higher education qualifications, maybe go out and doing a uni course or a TAFE course, assigning challenging work tasks. These are all strategies that managers could have in place to make sure that the drive to learn or comprehend is met by as many employees as possible within their workplace. And the drive to defend, our inherent desire to protect ourselves from harm and to protect our personal security. So at work, this could be your position in the business, or maybe even a threat to the business itself if it got that serious. This drive can sometimes reflect an individual's pride or their connection to the business. So once again, some strategies that can be put in place by the managers um, can be using people-focused management styles, building trust with the employees by supporting them, communicating with them, collaborating with them. Link back to management styles, using the people-focused management styles. Developing a vision and goals that the employees actually agree with for the business, and making sure that performance management strategies, which we look at later, are fair. Okay, so I think this is a fairly simple theory, I reckon. Now, what we're going to do here is quickly look at the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages, if you like, of using each of these three theories. Now, this is useful for your discuss questions, okay? Think about when you've got to discuss Maslow's theory of motivation, discuss Locke and Latham's, all you're doing is providing a list of pros and cons. What I'm going to do here is really isolate those out for you to give them to you for all intents and purposes. So, advantages of using Maslow. Okay, it allows the manager to put in place some very targeted strategies that directly address specific employee motivational needs because you're working out where each person is and working out what's best to get them to the next level. It provides a pathway for managers to help employees ultimately achieve their full potential. So, self actualization, the fifth level. And some of the strategies used here are low or no cost. So, for example, encouraging teamwork, plus many of the others, if you look back at that list of strategies, a lot of them don't cost money. Anything in business that does not cost money that can lead to good things, obviously win-win. Some negatives of using Maslow's. We talked about this. It can be really, really time consuming for the manager to kind of work out what each individual, what level each individual is at, and then implement strategies for each. So time consuming, definitely an issue. It also assumes that everybody is motivated by the same things in the same order and that nothing else provides motivation. Now, look, for me, the 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 hierarchy and the levels do kind of make sense, and I think they align. I'm aligned with that. It does make sense for me, but humans are different. As we were talking about Maslow, and you were putting your notes, maybe you even thought, "Oh, this doesn't make sense to me. Like this would not motivate me in this order." So the assumption is here that everybody's motivated by the same things in the same order. That might not necessarily be the case. Um, Third one here, it can be really challenging sometimes come up with strategies that are going to meet those higher order needs. Now, when we talk about higher order needs in Maslow, really it means the top two levels. Um, because some employees rely heavily on intrinsic motivation. So, in other words, self motivation. So, nothing that you provide as a manager is going to get some people to the top levels. Some people are really, really kind of rely on a sense of self drive and self motivation. So, as a manager, it's really hard to get that kind of person to the top. It's kind of got to come from within, it's got to be intrinsic. Locke and Latham advantages. Great thing about Locke and Latham is if you can somehow align individual goals with the business objectives, the overall the overall performance of the business can be improved. So if you can be clever about how you collaboratively set these goals, and you're aware of what the business is trying to achieve, and you kind of try to align all the individuals in the same direction, it can really help lift the performance of the business. The collaborative aspects of the goal setting process, okay, and then that regular feedback that needs to happen really, really helps to develop a relationship and build trust between the employees and management. Always a good thing. Anything that you can be doing that builds trust between employees and management and builds that relationship, always in the long run going to be a really, really good thing. Any other positive thing here? Look, expectations are really clear. We've got set goals, constant feedback. Everybody knows where we're at. We're all on the same page. It's just all clear and nice and easy to manage. Okay. Negatives, again, we've mentioned before, like Maslow, time consuming because we need to meet with each employee to collaboratively set the goals, and then we need these regular meetings to provide the ongoing feedback. So it is a bit of a drain on time. Um, I talked before about if you can align the employee goals with the overall objectives of the business. It can be difficult sometimes to do that, particularly with certain types of jobs. Like it's hard to kind of connect the two together. So it's not the easiest thing to do in many cases. Um, and this last one, I mean, it's a negative if you're a bit silly about how you do the process. But look, employees can become stressed and demotivated if they have too many goals or if they fail to meet some of the goals. So again, look, it failed to meet some goals. This really should be addressed by providing the feedback. And if we're on track not to meet the goal, maybe to rein things in a little bit. So this can be managed. This last one, and again, not set too many goals. Let's not be silly about it. It's better to have a few clear goals which are achievable than have 20. That just would just become too much. So this one really can be managed. So it's at a disadvantage theoretically, but if you're sensible about the process, you can kind of get around that one. Four drive theory. But the main advantage of this one, particularly compared with the others, is that all employees get motivated simultaneously by providing a full range of strategies which satisfy each need. So if you go back to the strategies we looked at for each of the four drives to meet the four needs, the four drives, as management, you can just make sure we have all of these in place generally across the business all of the time. And that way, they're set in place already, and then all employees can be motivated simultaneously without even thinking about it. Okay. Leading on from that, it's less time consuming because it doesn't necessarily involve meeting with each individual employee. According to that Lawrence and Nohria theory, if we have all of that stuff in place, it will allow each employee to fulfill each of those drives. Everyone's a winner. Another one here, another advantage, fulfilling the drive to bond. You're going to get a more positive corporate culture. Okay. So in other words, if everybody is feeling part of the team and feeling connected to the business and connected to one another, we're going to have a more positive culture, and positive culture in a business leads to lots and lots of good things. Okay. Happier staff, more productive staff that are going to stay, so on, so forth. Challenges, negatives, four drive theory. Look, it can be hard for management to implement and manage strategies to fulfill all of these drives at the same time. You think there's lots of strategies to kind of be on top of all of those at one time can be a challenge. It focuses on individual rewards. Think about the drive to acquire. And again, that can create internal competition, which might kind of rub against this idea of teamwork. So that would make more sense possibly when we look at motivational strategies, which is the next key knowledge dot point. But yeah, if your drive to acquire, if all the stuff you've got in place to allow people to meet that drive is based on individual bonuses and people focusing on their individual acquisition, then it can create some internal competition. And as we find out later, it's not good for teamwork, and it can create a bit of an unhealthy culture. Satisfying certain drives, acquire, comprehend, can actually be quite expensive. So strategies for drive to comprehend, like putting people on training courses, paying for them to go to TAFE or uni, obviously there's a cost to those. So there are some investment decisions to be made when you're looking at some of those strategies. Okay, so now think about compare questions. So we already touched on a few of these already. Compare questions, what are we doing? Okay, we're looking at similarities and difference. So let's take the different combinations here, and again, just build up similarity and differences. We're kind of like we're doing the work for you here. Okay, so when you've got discuss and compare questions, we're basically giving you what you use to plug in to answer those questions. So let's think about Maslow and four drive. Similarities, both theories focus on the idea that fulfillment of needs is what drives motivation. Both include the desire to feel a sense of belonging, social needs with Maslow, drive to bond with four drive theory, and both theories include the desire to improve knowledge and skills. The higher order the top two with Maslow, and the drive to learn with the four drive theory. Differences between Maslow and four drive. Maslow's needs must be fulfilled in that prescribed order, going 1 through to 5, whereas with the four drive theory, there is no order. And Maslow's needs are fulfilled only one at a time, and that's a key part of the theory. You go from one and then the next one becomes your main motivator, whereas with the four drive theory, all needs are met simultaneously. Simple. Maslow versus goal setting. Similarities. Both theories include an emphasis on motivating through intrinsic factors. Okay, goal setting involves setting intrinsic goals, whilst Maslow's higher order needs, esteem and self-actualization, are also intrinsic, come from within motivators. And also, both of these theories recognize that personal gain can motivate employees through esteem, such as high status with the Maslow theory, and with Locke and Latham, the goals consider personal objectives. So both are recognizing that personal gain can motivate employees. Differences. With Maslow, you fulfill one need at a time in that sequence again, but with goal setting, it means you got to meet all of those 5 principles of the theory simultaneously. And then secondly, goal setting believes an individual can be motivated purely through intrinsic factors, whereas Maslow includes both intrinsic and extrinsic. So the lower order needs at the bottom of Maslow are extrinsic, the physiological and safety, and the top ones are intrinsic. Four drive versus goal setting, the last combination. Similarities. Both theories recognize that employees are motivated to achieve success. Four drive theory to acquire higher position, for example, or achieving the goal of being promoted to a more senior position. And both theories suggest that multiple factors motivate an employee at any given time. Simple as that. Differences here. The goal setting theory involves employee input to gut the four drive theory is applied by a manager alone, but not gut. Goal setting requires a manager to address each employee individually, where that's not necessarily with the four drive theory. It's all set, and it's all it's set in place for all employees to reach at the same time. And then goal setting believes an individual can be motivated through purely intrinsic factors, but again, four drive theory also addresses those extrinsic motivators through the drive to acquire. So, summing up, what have we covered? What do you need to be able to do? Okay. First off, you need to be able to explain and describe each of the theories of motivation in varying level of details for varying level of marks, because you can be asked the same question, but for different levels of marks. So, for example, for 2 to 3 mark explanation of Maslow, something like what you see on the screen there would probably suffice. If you saw the exact same question, explain, describe the theory, but for 4 marks, or maybe even more, you could then maybe include what the 5 levels actually are, and then after that maybe give an example of a strategy to move from one level to the next. So what you need to learn to do, and this is just purely through practicing exam questions, which we'll do lots of, explaining or describing the theories for basically different number of marks, for different levels of detail. You need to discuss each of the theories, which is why I went through the process of looking at the advantages and disadvantages. So you just refer back to your list of pros and cons. We've already taught structure of discussed questions, and so far you're kind of nailing it, largely speaking. To meet the requirements for a discuss, you've got to cover both sides. Ideally, 2 of each, but if you were stuck, you go 3 + 1, 1 + 3. And again, signposting and structuring. One advantage of Maslow's theory, for example, is a second advantage is one disadvantage, so on and so forth. So I don't think I'm needing to bang on about that quite so much these days, because you seem to be getting that pretty well. And then compare, which is why we went through the last part of the process. And again, signpost and structure. A similarity between them is a second similarity, a difference, a second difference. And again, just make sure you're covering both. 2 + 2, 1 + 3, or 3 + 1 is fine. And that is it. Explain how a theory could be used in a given case scenario. This is why, with each of them, I gave you strategies that either a precise description of how the manager needs to implement it, or strategies, or both strategies that can be used, to get from one level to the next one. Not so. This one really depends on the information provided with. So the key here often is to identify what's missing in the case in terms of motivation, and then describe one of the strategies we looked at here to deal with that. And really, the only way to do that is to see questions and practice that. Okay, so very often, for example, they'll give you lots of information about the people in a business, and it might be very evident that particular employees not feeling a part of the team. Yeah, they're not feeling the love or whatever. So then you're going to start talking. If you were talking Maslow, you put in theories to get them to the third level. And if you were going to go down the Lawrence and Nohria route, the drive to bond. So that becomes more apparent when you see cases. Okay, if you have a good understanding of each of the strategies and how to apply them, usually this is pretty straightforward. They don't make it too complicated for you. That is it for motivation theories. A lot of information there. Refer back to this video, use your textbook, whatever you need to do, but it's really, really important that you do have a really good understanding of each of those theories, how they're applied, so that, when you see cases, you can kind of recognize, particularly given particular scenarios, how each of those theories, or at least how one of the theories, can be used by a manager to address issues within the case as it's presented to you. That's it, guys. I will stop talking. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.